once you know what's going on, you will know what is signal and what is noise. Version 13 was a fundamental shift when it comes to self-driving for Tesla. I think that was a ChatGPT moment for Tesla. So what the heck is version 14 gonna look like?
I am seeing the signal that they are building a great degree of confidence in the technical achievement of FSD. If we project out a year, we're clearly going to be operating in 6 plus 9, 12 cities without anybody, no Tesla employee in the car at all. If your competitors can't scale and you can, and you control pricing, how can they succeed? How does Uber succeed in that business? What Tesla is doing is it's signaling loudly, we are an AI company, we are an autonomy company, we are building embodied artificial intelligence in two forms, robots, vehicle robots and humanoid robots. And this is where we are spending our money, our efforts, our focus. This chip, the AI6 chip, will be the convergence chip. And what that means is it will be the brains of Optimus, be the brains of the future Robotaxi or any Tesla vehicle. And it will also be the brains of Doja, which is super important. This will be on the class of an NVIDIA GPU style chip.
How fast do you think Tesla Robotaxi expansion will be from now to end of the year?
What I think is that...
Welcome, everybody. I'm bringing back Phil Beisel to the channel because there's some really interesting things happening with Tesla, and I think Phil has the best explanation and the best way for us Tesla investors to understand what's really going on. There's, Tesla making deals with AI6, with Samsung, and then we've got the version 14 he's talking about. Elon replying back to Phil as well on X. So there's a lot of interesting things going on. And as a Tesla investor, for someone like me, I look at the numbers, but it's really important to understand the fundamentals, because once you know what's going on, you will know what is signal and what is noise. And I think this is very important for us to know. And very happy to have you back, Phil. And this is going to be an awesome podcast, and I know everyone's going to enjoy this.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you're here. And make sure everyone go follow Phil on X. His link is in the description. He comes out with awesome articles and awesome thoughts. So, and yes, I'm a follower too, so I highly recommend you guys. So Phil, what a week. I mean,
insane.
Where do we even start? Insane. Where do we even start? Like, okay, we'll leave the best for last with the AI6, but let's talk about, you made a really interesting point, and it was the main reason why I asked to come here for this podcast, is you were talking about version 14. Now, the thing with version 14 is that, how does that even look like? Because Elon keeps talking about that it has 10 times more parameters.
Right.
I'm not an engineer. You're an engineer, so you know this. What does that even mean? What can we expect? Because version 13 was I would say, a fundamental shift when it comes to self-driving for Tesla. I think that was a ChatGPT moment for Tesla. So, or for just self-driving in general. So what the heck is version 14 gonna look like? And what is all this 10 times parameters and stuff? Help us.
Yeah, well, I mean, great question. To be clear, I don't have inside information on this, but I can read the tea leaves pretty well. So, the one thing that I would say is, we don't know it's going to be called version 14, but we'll refer to it as version 14, which is been talked about publicly by Elon himself as having 10x the number of parameters versus a model 13, which was also roughly an order of magnitude bigger than version 12. So what does that mean? Let's just kind of set that up a little bit. A neural network has a bunch of layers in it, and they may not all be uniform, but let's keep it simple and say that there are these things called layers. And within these layers, they have these nodes or neurons, by the namesake of the thing. And then these nodes are connected to their downstream layer nodes. So if you've got, a layer 1 and it's got 100 nodes, each one of them is connected to layer 2's nodes and so forth, and at least in a fully connected neural network, which this is probably of that type. And so now those connections have a set of weights to them And then each of the nodes also have what are called a fixed bias, a bias. These are just numbers. They're basically numbers. And in the train side of this, these are floating point numbers. In other words, 1.36 and 2.97 and so forth. And then if you sum up those weights for the node connections and the biases associated with the nodes in these layers, that equals the parameters. So when you call, say a network has so many parameters, you kind of have to look at the number of neurons in each layer and then how they're connected downstream, usually fully connected. And then that there's, some number of weights that equal the number of nodes, and then the biases, which are all the connections. So this is how this thing is configured. And so when you train this thing through, Googles of data, driving data, what happens is you pretty much can set all these numbers to 0, and then the thing starts, as it trains, it pushes data through it. It starts to create values through the process, and that we should just say is beyond the scope of our discussion what that process is. But there's some articles I wrote that describe the training process and how that works. And eventually what happens is these numbers equate to some goodness that, and that goodness would be this. When you take an arbitrary driving scenario and you push it, meaning on your car, and you push it through the inference side. So now this model, so I should have said the word model here. So if you take the layer architecture, the nodes, the weights, and the biases, and you kind of just freeze that thing, that's the model. You just freeze it. You just say, okay, it's frozen in time. And then you drop it down on the car. So once it drops down to the car, it's read-only. It doesn't change. It just gets exercised. It just gets activated through inference. So to keep it simple, what happens is on the car, you'll have a driving sample, a driving segment, which is a bunch of frame data from the cameras and some other data. And it gets pushed through the neural network. And what it does is it outputs control values. What should the steering angle be? What should the accelerator pedal be? What should the brake pedal be? That's kind of what it does. Now, why is this network a certain size versus another size? It's a bit arbitrary, to be honest. What Tesla would do is they would say, well, let's try a 100-layer neural network with this many nodes per layer. And I'm just, for sake of argument, keeping this uniform. There's a lot more to this. What is that number? Why would they try a certain number? They would try that certain number because it's kind of like a Goldilocks thing. It's just, it's not too hot, not too cold. It's like we can train it with a certain amount of data. We can run it comfortably within the current hardware of the vehicles, hardware 4, say running version 13. And so we want to make it big as we possibly can, but we're constrained by things. And we're constrained by how much training time we want to spend on it. Okay, so it's not necessarily a linear relationship, but if you double the size of the neural network, you could say that you approximately double the training time. And then you've got the inference issue, which is, how quick do you get that? Elon talks a lot about photon to control. And what he's saying is we take light data in through the cameras and we actuate these controls through a brain in the middle, which is the neural network. And what he's saying is, I want to have the least latency, the lowest time between getting these photons in and actuating these controls. And that has a lot to do with the size of that neural network. If it was really, really small, you would get extreme, you could probably do that process 100 times a second or more, but you'd have poor outcomes. If it was really, really big, you might be able to do it once a second. You might get great outcomes, but once a second isn't enough. You need to be doing it roughly 15 to 30 times a second, for something that's, let's call it a good driver, right? Something that's, much better than you and I, but still 15 to 30 times a second would be reducing that input to output latency. So, okay, it's a lot of information. What they're going to do with version 14 is they're going to increase the parameter count by about 10x, so 1 order of magnitude. That may mean that they're increasing the layers in the network, but it certainly means they're increasing the number of nodes because that affects the connections and those weights and biases we talked about. Maybe the first question is, why do that at all? The reason we do this is that we're going to get more nuance In other words, you can think of the brain as having more thinking points, more neurons, more connections lead to more nuanced behavior as we're bringing driving samples through this network. So ideally, they would like it to be as big as possible to get that amount of nuance. And so what we've heard is that, okay, they're going to do this. We've also heard, and Elon had responded to a post I made about this, saying that, kind of a thumbs up and a repost, which kind of means he read it. And I kind of believe he did, because it's very techy, and I don't think he'd want to endorse misrepresentations. Yeah, I mean, because I don't know. I'm always right in these things. I'm a little bit guessing.
Yeah. Usually, when he comments and reposts,
yeah, he's a quick read. he's got a big neural network. So yeah, so I mean, the end state here is what I think they're saying is they're giving us a signal that we want to build a larger neural network. I believe they now have the compute capacity to train it in effectively the same amount of time that they trained the smaller one, version 13. And I think that they have engineered the ability to run that on hardware 4, which means that basically in the field robotaxis as well as customer cars with hardware 4 will be able to run version 14. And I think that will be true. I think there's a lot of tricks to make that so. In other words, if you get this model that's 10x the size, you theoretically have about 10x the processing power requirement on the inference, right? And you can't that unless there was a lot of headroom sitting around, and I believe there's some headroom on hardware 4. But I think that they've applied some tricks here, and one of them is an article I wrote on the mixture of experts approach. There's a lot to say about that, but what that means is that they probably have divided their neural network into these modules that are trained for certain scenarios. In other words, one of the experts might be highway driving expert, and another expert might be city driving, and another expert might be orthogonal to this, like driving in rain or driving in at night. And what they do in a mixture of experts architecture is they kind of give weights to what's more important. So, for example, driving on the highway at night, there might be 2 experts involved. And they're saying, oh, the highway one is the expert that, 70% of its outputs they're valuing it at 70%. And then maybe the nighttime is the 30%. And they mix that together. Why would they do this? Well, they would do this because now they can have a very large neural network with these experts that aren't all activated during every drive cycle. In other words, anything that was an expert on rain or anything that was an expert on city driving would be excluded when you're driving at night on a highway and it's not raining. So that's an optimization. Well, it's 2 things. It gives you better focused behavior for the scenarios that you're operating within. And then secondly, you reduce the processing time because you're only activating portions of the neural network. So that's one way to achieve the same performance or lower the performance requirements for a much bigger model. So they might be saying, well, guess what? We added in version 14, it's a 10x bigger model, but it's divided up into more experts, and therefore we activate less experts per inference cycle. Am I making sense? Yeah. So that's one thing. And then there's a bunch of other tricks of the trade that would be required to kind of fit that model inside hardware 4. But here's the thing. We used to think it was going to be a 4x bigger model that's been bantied about or, talked about. And Elon said, well, no, it's going to be 10x. And that was a good sign. I mean, it means that they wanted to build a bigger one. They felt it was necessary or good to do so. And then they were able to make it work. I guarantee they certainly have candidate builds for that, because it's easy for them to do that. They can train just a few epochs and a small amount of training data, not the big training data. And they'll get themselves that architecture, right? They'll get that outcome. It may suck. It may not be as good as they want it, but they can then just see how it routes the visual data to the controls, like how fast they can achieve that. Because after all, no matter what the numbers say inside the neural network, the processing time would be the same, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether it's just a matter of what do the outcomes come up with, good things or not. So they can test it, right? So they can say, let's send I don't know, 100,000 training samples through it. We have this architecture. We'll come out with it, and then we'll go send it off to a team that focuses, literally 24/7 for a couple of weeks on just figuring out whether this is going to run well on hardware 4. And then they can say, oh, this is looking good. Let's push this into, full training of the complete data set. Remember, it doesn't matter how many data elements you use. So you've got a couple things going on here. You've got the size of this neural network, and then you've got the size of your training corpus, the amount of data that you want to train with.
Yeah.
These are sort of independent things. I mean, training data will affect the amount of time it takes to fix these or nudge these parameters in the network. But once you get the parameters done and ready to go to the car, it doesn't matter how many training samples you used. You could, whether you used 1, 10, a million, a billion, it's just a bunch of numbers now. And now the brain is, a good brain. I mean, whether it's a bad brain or a good brain relates to the training data, right?
Yeah.
But not how fast the brain will compute on the car.
Can version 14, will it fit hardware 4?
Yes.
Cars, or it can? Okay.
Yeah.
So they don't need to make they don't, I mean, I guess it'll be easier on AI 5, but on AI 4, if it can be on version 14, because I know for version 13, they're having a very hard time putting it on hardware 3 cars.
Yes.
Because it's an older model.
Yes.
So the fact that if version 14 can go on hardware 4, that's actually really good.
Yeah, I mean, I am not 100% certain, but there's a lot of signals that Elon has given, for example, responding to my post where I basically said, the good news is this thing's going to fit. And he kind of said, you're over the target here. So I believe it'll fit. Remember, hardware 3 is substantially less processing than a hardware 4. And of course, and then by the way, they changed the nomenclature that they'll go from hardware 4 to AI 5. It's the same thing. So they, you could call it AI hardware 4 or AI 4 are the same thing. It's just a renaming. So going from hardware 4 to AI 5, you're jumping processing wise by about 5x, and I think maybe up to 10x, but I think about 4 to 5x. And then you started down here with hardware 3, and I think that guy was significantly underpowered to 4. I mean, that's just the march of what we do in tech, right? I mean, it kind of follows Moore's law that we, every year or two, we kind of double or more the processing in these units, and therefore, we can do more with them. And so we've got, eventually we'll have AI 5 chip, I think late 26. And then, then by that time, they'll probably have a version 15 that isn't 10x the parameters, but maybe, another 5x on the top of that 10x or another order of magnitude. I mean, it is better in some respect to build a larger neural network, and it's just a matter of the constraints you have. And the other thing is that this is something that I think is a bit misunderstood. There's a lot of people out there who will ask honestly or just be a critic, kind of just someone throwing lob balls in there. But they'll say things like, well, if Tesla can run Robotaxi on hardware 4, then why are they even bothering building AI 5? Isn't that a sign that they can't do it? And that is clearly not a sign that they can't do it. That's an insane thought process. I mean, that would be like saying Apple builds the A18 chip, and then this year they'll release the new models with A19. And well, why the hell did they do A19? Wasn't, and it's like, well, because you want more and you can get more, kind of on that Moore's law curve. And I always say, being a software guy, that software eats hardware. So whatever's there to consume processing power, the software guys will do it. And when they can't do it, they'll have to optimize around the hardware that's available to them. So I think in hardware 4 vehicles, to get this larger model to run, they did a lot of optimizations.
Yeah, no, that's a very good explanation of it. What do you expect version 14 is going to look like? Because we already see how impressive version 13 is.
Mm-hmm.
What do
Well,
you
I mean,
expect version 14 to be?
I think what we're dealing with is sort of this march of nines, right? We get a little bit better by some percentage of the nuance to driving behavior. So I think in the next model, you just get a lot more nuanced fine grained control and effectively more decisions that can be made concurrently. And I think it just means that, I mean, you may be, I mean, on some safety scale, you may be 1x better than a human, 5x better than a human, 10x better than a human. You know, you just get to the point where the human is clearly left behind, almost like, you know, looking like they're a hardware 3-unit car. Yeah. So what can we expect? I mean, more, better, faster. It just means that you'll be able to just get more nuance in the model. I mean, think of it this way, in the simplest of terms, it's sort of like saying my brain has so many neurons that process my driving abilities, and I can drive this good, whatever this good means. Maybe I drive like, you know, your grandma or something, but I don't drive like a F1 race car driver, right? I don't have the ability to make the little nuanced decisions that allow me to drive at speed. I think what you can think about when you increase the size of these models is that that's what's happening here. You're going from grandma driving to F1 driving. I don't mean it literally, but what I mean is that you get a system, a robotic system here, an autonomous system that is just much more capable of driving than the previous thing that's out there. And that's just, you know, what's cool about FSD is that once you get that model right, once you build that model in the lab and you push it out on all the vehicles, everyone's an F1 driver now, right? I mean, that's like every car gets that instantly. It's not humans like,
It takes time to build,
yeah,
learning.
I mean, like maybe one of your children's a great driver and somehow intuitively gets the sense of how to drive. And then maybe you have a younger child that's coming up and they're inexperienced and it takes them all this time to gather this experience. But that's not what's happening. These cars are infused with, you know, that level of experience all at once. There's no time it takes any of the individual cars to learn this. So to said another way, once one car gets better than your best or pretty good human driver, they all do at the same time.
Yeah, version 13 was very impressive. I can only imagine what version 14 is going to be. That's going to be insane.
Yeah,
I mean,
version 13 is damn impressive in my opinion. I mean, yeah. You know, I've watched it mature myself, and I've driven about 3,000 miles on it. It's not perfect. I think the one that's running around in Austin is much more, it's dealt with a lot of the issues. Yeah, it's way ahead. I mean, it's months ahead of where, remember, think about it this way. When you hear Tesla talking about, when you hear an engineer at Tesla or Elon himself talk about their confidence in their full self-driving, they're always kind of dialed into where they are internally, not where we are. In fact, as humans, it's almost impossible to think in the past. Like they're not like making, they may understand what the customer version looks like, but they probably know the customer version, you know, 13.2.9 by its problems, not by general capability. So when they talk about, oh, we're confident in this, or they signal that they're confident, they're talking about something they have that they've been running, and they're obviously going to be 3 to 6 months ahead of maybe a month, but they're going to be ahead of us on a timeline basis. So in a way, they're literally like looking into the future, a future they have that they're operating on that we just don't have yet. And that's just completely normal, you know, for a software organization. It has to be, or is moving ahead of where the customer base is on a version basis. So when you hear them, it's like, it's hard to lie about it, you know, because you could consciously lie about it, but it's like when you hear, and I've read this because being somebody who's done software forever and managing teams of software engineers, like I can just kind of hear when there's a truth being told. And when I listen to the VP of autonomy, Shock, it just like I get it. Like I get what he's kind of leaning in on, and he's like, and you can see his confidence, independent of Elon, is building. It's a super important thing because you can see Elon kind of like he's got an engineering mindset, but he's also got kind of a marketing the company mindset, which is completely reasonable. And so he's going to have generally a more optimistic view than his teams. Well, he may not, but he does. And then when you start to see the teams catch up to his optimism, and I look at a lot of posts by the engineers within the company. They don't say a lot, but it's the nuance. It's a read between the lines thing that I'm focused on.
I agree with you there. It's very exciting stuff. Very exciting stuff. Yeah, you mentioned Austin Robotaxi, how it's different when their FSD is different there, and I think so too. I think it's a few versions ahead. They recently also just expanded in the Bay Area, and maybe by the time this
down to my neighborhood, literally.
Yeah, there. Hopefully, you get an invite so you can go.
I'm waiting.
But, yeah, so you'll get it. Hey, Elon, give us an invite. Come
on, man.
Anyway, but I think by the time this video comes out, who knows? Maybe other parts of the U.S., Tesla Robotaxi will expand because they are expanding fast, and they are expanding so much far ahead of Waymo that they spent I would say maybe a decade for having that geofence area, and then here comes Tesla's one day taking more area than Waymo on day one, which is crazy.
I mean, there's some clear differences in terms of in the Bay Area. They're actually there's supervised drivers at the wheel, right? There's literally someone at the wheel, whereas in Austin there's an observer who sits in the passenger seat. The reason that's being done in the Bay Area is largely compliant with the autonomous driving kind of sequences of events that occur. Waymo did that too in the early days. You could take a Waymo ride in San Francisco, but there was a driver in the car, and then suddenly there wasn't. It's more of a function of California's rules than Tesla's constraints.
I think it's 55,000 miles, and then after that,
there's
something like that.
There's some door you have to go through, and then you can. And I applaud them for doing this because it's super. Here's the thing. I think they are definitely going slow to go fast. They are, they are very limited in what they're doing in Austin on purpose. It's not just pure limitation. It's their concern for safety. Obviously, one part of safety is if you F up, the world knows about it instantly. I mean, it will be broadcast instantly, but they also care about that. I mean, exactly. Tesla's held to a different standard, and we'll just say they are, and who cares, they are. But I think just philosophically, internally, safety is super important to them. I don't think they're playing around. They're not, shooting from the hip. That's not what's going on. So in Austin, they're kind of really dialed in. And I wrote this article, FSD, the magic of FSD Part 6, Robotaxi. I encourage people to read it because it kind of digs into what's going on in the ground in Austin and how they're validating the driving and so forth, which they've been doing in the Bay Area for quite some time. I mean, if up in their hood, headquarters or research is done on Deer Creek Road in Palo Alto. By the way, Deer Creek Road is where Steve Jobs founded Next Computer. Before he went back to Apple. And I've seen the so-called validation vehicles running around that neighborhood constantly. I mean, I could go up there, probably see a couple of them today. So people see these things in Austin. They're like, oh my God, what's going on in Austin? But they've been doing that here for quite some time. But I think that what's happening in Austin is exactly how they want it to go. They want to be very focused and dialed into the Austin roadway landscape, get it right there, and then expand it. So I am seeing the signal that they are building a great degree of confidence in the technical achievement of FSD. I'm not saying they've completely checked the box on the technical, but they're darn close internally. Now, people might differ with me, but that's a Wall Street view. It's the analysts in the Wall Street still ascribe an extreme amount of technical risk to the project. fair. Let them do it, because they won't see that relief until they see the safety observers or drivers be removed from the car, until the geofences start expanding. But what I'm seeing out of Tesla is that they're moving phases. They're moving from a pure technical phase. By the way, this isn't the same number of people. Like, the engineers are still focused on their task, and they'll be focused on that task until AI 6 chip comes out or more, right? But there's a whole operational side that's occurring now. In other words, they're becoming a rideshare network, and that means that they've got to hire people to monitor from an operations center, the vehicles in the field, deal with their geofence expansion on the non-technical basis, like what city are they going to, what area are they going to cover, what the rates are going to be, how they're going to deal with customer issues. I mean, remember, like, you get these situations like with Waymo where the car isn't going exactly where it's supposed to, and it gets stuck somewhere, and the customers have to interact with customer support and beg them to unlock the vehicle and let them out, because they don't want to let them out on a highway, but at the same time, the people feel trapped in the vehicle. Those are operational issues, right? And Tesla is going to have all those operational issues. It's not like they're free and clear of that. So I think Tesla internally is moving from more of a phase of technical risk to operational risk. That includes regulatory compliance, like how you get cleared. Like, look at California. There's an example of operational risk. They don't have the right to drive these cars yet without drivers in the driver's seat supervising. So we're going to see all that. And I think the thing for the viewer to pay attention to is literally forget about what's happening at the moment and just look ahead a year and think about where they might be. What you can do in your brain is you can say, if you're a pessimist, you can assume a very straight line, that the scale goes slow, that they have issues, they have problems, they keep it scaled back. If you're an optimist, you might see the scale like kind of an S curve, right? But I think if you really kind of get down to what's going on, is you're going to see more of the S curve thing going on here, because it's the natural act. You see them, hyper focus on what's going on. You see a lot of linear thinking from analyst Wall Street community, but then that's not how Tesla's approaching the problem. And clearly Tesla, I mean, we all know Elon. We know that he's not a go slow guy. He's not sitting back thinking, oh, I want to go super slow to make this thing called a robot. I mean, he's basically wanting to conquer every city as quickly as possible, bounded by how much can you do at what speed. So I would say the adoption, if you go back, if we project out a year, we're clearly going to be operating in 6 + 9, 12 cities without anybody no Tesla employee in the car at all. I fully expect that. Cybercab will probably in that period debut, as the vehicle will start. Like right now it's very Model Y, and that's a great vehicle for it, but eventually Cybercab is really tuned in for the operational cost efficiency that'll make this thing. I mean, the point is this. I mean, once you can scale, it's like a button. They can hit that button, say, let's scale. And what are you held back by? Are you held back by the technical risk, operational risk? There's a point where you kind of check both of those boxes, and then you're just held back by your ability to deliver cars into the market. That's why on a parallel track, you've got Lars and team building the hell out of Cybercab in this unbox process to try to get that process oiled well from a manufacturing point of view, and then pop out Cybercabs at an unbelievable rate at the back end of the factory, right? And then if you've hit that scale button, and then you're producing those things at 500 a day, you can enter 500. I know, right? I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about it, but really, I think whether you're an investor or an enthusiast or just technology enthusiast, you really kind of project out. You always got to kind of apply these S curves to technology adoption, or Moore's law to the more physical technical aspects, and just say to yourself, what do I think this is going to look like in a year from now? what does it look like in 5 years from now? And if you do that, you're either super enthused about it, or you can't make the argument in your own brain that it's going to be much different. I think in my brain, it's going to be a takeover business, right? I think it's just going to take over rideshare and probably dimensionally change how we move about. What I mean is affect a lot of aspects of things like private vehicle sales so I think at the low end will start to crater as younger generation just simply gets in these cybercabs and moves from A to B.
Yep, and I know we talked about it last time. We said that driver's license, there's not gonna be much of that. That number's going down too.
It's absolutely crazy. When I turned 17, grew up in coastal New Jersey, and you had to be 17 to drive a vehicle. I think most states in the U.S. are 16. I know California's 16. I was like, I need my license. This is a thing. And I talked to my friends, and I have kids that just, within the last couple of years got their license. And my kids had a reasonable urgency, but some of my friends' children have no urgency, it seems, which I find so unusual. To me, it was like the thing of that marked your freedom. But I think that they see the world differently. And that, to me, the idea of a robot driving them around will be very natural. An older generation person, I think, won't think that way. But they're the depleting population pool. It's the new demographic that's coming. So
yeah, my nephew who's 7, he loves cars, and you can't get your license in Canada unless I think it's either 16 or 18 between them. And he's very excited. I'm like, well, I mean, don't be too excited. By the time you become time for you to get your license, I don't think you want to get your license. You wouldn't need to get your license.
I mean, driving is sort of sometimes a liberating experience for an individual, but it's also at other times an extremely frustrating one, right? And it depends on why you're driving. If you're driving for a commute or very functional reasons, it just is, annoying. Like even just going to a restaurant or something, you're like, I got to find parking. If I overspend 2 hours, they start charging me for parking. So do I start looking at my watch just to, save a buck? Or then I got to worry about, did I have a couple cocktails or, wine or beer at dinner, and I have to worry about driving home? And, imagine just going to your favorite restaurant in a cybercab, enjoying yourself, coming home, or just stepping out of your favorite restaurant and there's 3 of them sitting there. I think that's the thing that people probably don't understand, is that with Robotaxi fully, I think one of the things that we'll see in this network because Tesla can do volume. I think what we'll see these things everywhere, and to the point that we'll start throwing away this idea that, Uber driver's 8 minutes away. In densely populated areas, I think we'll see these things literally waiting on street corners like cabs do at hotels and taxi stands, and I think we'll just see that behavior on a kind of constant basis, and there'll be an abundance of supply, and so your mean time between calling the ride and getting in the vehicle will be very, very minimal, and that will not only attract people to use that platform, but it will just attract people to the idea that because this thing has little friction, why drive my own car if this has little friction? Why buy a car if this has little friction? Yeah, especially since moving around a Robotaxi at scale will probably be cheaper than owning the car,
and less headache too. And maybe it's like, don't get your license, just buy a cybercab and let it drive you everywhere, and make money out from it if you don't wanna use it.
Right.
So yeah, it's gonna be an interesting world we go slowly. What Tesla's doing is slowly at first, and then all at once. Knowing that, how fast do you think Tesla Robotaxi expansion will be from now to end of the year? Because I know Elon was talking about by end of the year, they're trying to get 50% of the U.S. population to use the Robotaxi service.
Yeah, I think, or maybe what I think he may have meant. I don't know the quote exactly. I know when he made it, it was in the earnings call.
Yeah,
but I think what he was trying to say is that people, based on city population, just population dispersion in the U.S., that 50% of the population could experience. The honest answer to your question, which sounds like complete hedge and a, ducking your question is, it depends. But I think it does depend. And I think that's the whole point about this, is that in order for Tesla, there's going to be a point where Tesla hits that scale button. Okay. And what I think is that they're in a mode right now of checking the boxes on all the technical aspects of their product and getting to the point where all the long tail of driving issues and things that they see are addressed. Think about it this way. If you're doing Robotaxi, if you're operating Robotaxi in Austin, and there may be, the car pulled out over the yellow line in some left-hand turn lane or left-hand turn situation, but then it came back, or it went through some stop sign. Those things get addressed almost instantly by the team. They'll take driving samples from that, and they'll immediately fine-tune their version, and they'll create a new build, and then they'll run it in their simulator to test it, and then they may put it out in a couple cars or the whole small fleet that they have when they gain some confidence in the build. And if you think about it, while the tail is long, like when you knock down a certain number of your problems, the problems that you're left with become more minimal. I mean, that's a typical software type of thing. Like if you were tuning something for performance, you knock the 10 top performance reasons off the chart, you have 10 new ones, but they're smaller in magnitude. They're smaller because they were below that. They're the first 10. And I think that's the same thing with Robotaxi. When they knock down 10 critical problems, 10 more show up, but those things are a little less critical, hopefully. And they knock down those 10 and they start getting into this very long tail. And they're going to decide where are they in the process of the severity. Like, I think the number of incidents coming in from their perspective is probably generally uniform. And you think, oh, it should decrease. No, it's not going to decrease, because the number of driving scenarios, I mean, it could decrease, but the number of driving scenarios, that long tail, is very long. It's almost infinite. But the question is, which ones are critical? Which ones are absolutely wrong decisions that lead to safety situations? And as they work through that, they're going to get maybe the same number, as I said, come in, but the severity of the ones that come in are less and less. And they're going to say that there's a judgment call somewhere around that. They say, this is what, I mean, think about it this way. It's clear to me as I run Robotaxi day in, day out, and this is true of FSD running in customers' vehicles, they have a very, very good internal safety score. They have a scoring mechanism, and it may be multiple scoring mechanisms, but they have it's called a dashboard, or a set of KPIs, key performance indicators, that tell them where they're going. And they see that trajectory. Somewhere along that path, they're gonna hit the scale button. Right? It's not a binary thing. It's not, it's a judgment call. Like, okay, we're good enough. We've reached a safety score that we have wanted to achieve internally, which puts us at 3x better than the human, 10x better. I don't know. I'm not quoting. I'm not telling you what their safety score is. I'm not telling you about how they view it. I'm just saying that they have such a thing. And so, to answer your question, they're going to look for that scoring, those KPIs to meet some objective. And at that point, then it's a matter of the operational aspects of regulatory compliance. Don't forget, there's something that people never talk about is infrastructure. Like they have to have charging infrastructure, cleaning infrastructure. These are all these things. If you put 1,000 cars on the road, you may be able to do it. The FSD version may be able to handle it conveniently, but you may not be able to charge them overnight because there's no place to do it, or they don't have enough capacity. So there's all these operational things that they have to, I mean, obviously they've been planning these things, but they've got to get through them. So I can't give you a straight answer other than saying that they've got a set of numbers they're looking at and a set of operational issues. And as they start to chip away at them, I'm sure Elon's pressing hard, but as they chip away at them, they'll release more into more and more markets. I think the best way to say this is, I think Robotaxi is a platform that is at the scale point when they are in 3 cities with no Tesla drivers in the vehicles. That would be my when I see that, that's signal to me. that says if we can do 3, we can do 30. If we could do it, at that point, I think they get it. And then it's just down to a lot of the operational aspects. And then the manufacturing aspects, like they're going to have to, we know they can build a lot of Model Ys, but ultimately they don't want Model Ys to be their premier, car, right? Because it costs them too much. They built Cybercab for the purpose of not just manufacturing efficiency and cost, but operational efficiency, right? They get like over 5 to 5.5 miles per kilowatt hour. That car is very different than a Model Y. It's built for, they can put less expensive parts on the car. They can put a smaller battery. They don't need the same high performance tires. They're not driving the car at high speeds. They don't need the car to operate with quick acceleration, so they can pull back a lot of the costs out of the model because they don't need those things that a customer would want in their vehicle. And still they get exactly the right customer experience. So they've designed the hell out of that vehicle for not just manufacturability at volume, but also all the right metrics for operating it with high efficiency, least amount of energy, most amount of miles, easy to clean, and all that stuff.
If I see even one city that the safety monitors are no longer needed, I mean, in my view, this thing is Tesla has won this race. It's just a matter of scaling, as you said.
I really do think this is true. I mean, we actually see a lot of now. You get a lot of more noise and publishing of the problems. And like I think the Waymo technical architecture doesn't scale. I did a post on that yesterday. No, I didn't say it didn't scale, but what I did say is that it's built in such a way that you can read through my post and realize that that's not really a scalable way to do it from a technical approach. And I kind of think, and I don't know how to say this without sounding a little goofy, but I think Tesla hasn't, I think that Google hasn't invested in a certain way in that project because I think they realize that the current platform doesn't scale. And that they've made some incorrect technical choices. Now, I'm sure some of the people listening to this will go, no, you're completely wrong. They made the proper choices. LiDAR is required. Vision only doesn't work. Do read my article, though, to at least have a good argument with me about why Tesla Vision should work. I do a good treatment on that, like technically. I'm not just, spewing optimism. But I think that's, it's if your competitors can't scale and you can, and you control pricing, how can they succeed? How does Uber succeed in that business?
Oh no, I don't know. I'm seeing them do some weird deals with Lucid and other FSD companies. I'm just like,
if their deal with Lucid was material and something that should raise eyebrows, it should be in the $3 billion, not the $300 million range, right? They talk about putting 20,000 vehicles into service over 5 years. I mean,
6 years.
6 years, okay. And let's just say it's 5, or let's say it's 50,000. I mean, Tesla will swamp them before they're at the 5th year, right?
That needs to be in 6 days, not 6 years, because Tesla delivers 20,000 robotaxis within 4 days.
The thing that I think most viewers should really focus on, let's say that they're an investor in Tesla or something, is don't take my word for it or anybody else that's seemingly bullish. Do this for yourself. Look back at Tesla a year ago from the moment that you're analyzing where they are and say, what did it look like a year ago? What did FSD look like a year ago? Remember, we're still in version 12 territory a year ago. They've since put version 13. The adoption is higher. The version 13 is, by many people's measure, an autonomous driving platform.
Yeah.
Like, in other words, if you took the wheel out of the car, you would be level 5. Some people believe it. I sort of do. I think you just need to do that and realize that Tesla, if you think in your mind that vision-related system can't make it, then step off the train and do something else, and stop talking about it. Just do something else. But if you think vision has a chance to make it, just then do what I said. Look at the trend, how much progress has been made in a year. You don't see it day to day. Each day doesn't look like, oh my God, But if you look back in bigger chunks of time, your mind is blown. And the best, I mean, you know what's really interesting about this? A neural network is literally about predicting the future based on data of the past. That's exactly what it is. It's not anything more complicated. It's not a thinking thing. It just uses data, sort of a probability thing. Uses data to train the future based on the future. If you get black swan events and things that are out of bounds, then it doesn't look very good. Like whether it's an LLM or anything. But so we don't know. Like we could say, well, a year from now, Tesla won't do well because something really tragic occurred or whatever. But if you look at it just from a pure technology without those crazy events, you just look at the adoption of where they were a year ago or 2 years ago, and you think about where they'll be a year or 2 years from now.
Yep.
You know,
a big difference. It's going to be a big difference. And the big news that just happened literally this week that I did not have in my bingo card for 2025
neither did
is
I.
that
I know what you're about.
AI,
I know what you're about to say.
yeah, AI 6.
Yeah.
And you know, I really want to know your thoughts on this because you are in that engineering world. You know how these things work. So I really want to know, like, what is this? Like, the importance of this is big. Like, this is like extremely bullish and probably one of the biggest signals that we can probably get this year.
Yes.
But most people don't understand like what the significance of Tesla inking a deal for AI 6 with Samsung is. Elon was talking about he could walk the line, which was a big bonus. I mean, that's insane.
The funny thing about that is I literally wrote a post on that when he said he could walk the line, and I quote posted on that, and I said,
Yeah,
Samsung doesn't know what's about to hit them. And then
yeah,
he felt the need to come in and reply to my post because I think he thought, oh shit, we might be sending the wrong signal to our new friends at Samsung that, you know, I'm going to be a crazy man or something. But yeah, I mean, it's super significant. It is big signal because it doesn't matter. Let's say this. Let's start with this. It doesn't matter that the chip is going to arrive in 2027, 28, late 28. I don't know, early 29. I don't know. That's not the point. The point is that what Tesla is doing is it's signaling loudly. We are an AI company. We are an autonomy company. We are building embodied artificial intelligence in two forms of robots, vehicle robots and humanoid robots. And this is where we are spending our money, our efforts, our focus. This chip, the AI 6 chip, will be the convergence chip. And what that means is it will be the brains of Optimus. It will be the brains of the future Robotaxi or any Tesla vehicle. And it will also be the brains of Dojo, which is, you know, super important. This will be on the class of an NVIDIA GPU style chip. You know, I don't know, maybe it'll be around the performance of Blackwell or something. It's a very interesting thing because on one hand, what Tesla is saying is, you know, we found that full vertical integration gives us control of the stack. In other words, we then become full stack. And if we start in lithium mines and end up with batteries, or if we start at a chip foundry and end up with chips that go into our products, we have control. We get to determine the outcomes. We're not just sourcing from a vendor and at the whims of what, you know, we can influence vendors. And in a sense, Samsung is a vendor here, let's be honest, but this is a tight deal. It's meant to be a tight deal. It's an exclusive deal on that entire facility in Texas, the foundry, Samsung foundry. So, you know, Tesla is signaling loudly that they want to go into that area of vertical integration, which if you kind of look out 5 years, it wouldn't be surprising if Tesla said, we're going to build a fab. It would be completely, you know, it's what they would do. They learn experience from the vendor, and then they determine, you know, is it worth doing ourselves? Do we get benefits? Are we smart enough to do it ourselves? You know, and then they do it themselves. And don't count them out. That's probably the trajectory. But it just tells you that the future of this product, the future of Tesla is AI. I mean, another way of thinking about it is look at this and say, what's going on at Ford Motor Company? What's going on at General Motors? What's going on at Toyota? What's going on at BMW? What's going on at VW? Are they building an exclusive relationship with one of the two premier chip fabrication companies in the world and building 10 to 20 million inference chips? No. It's like those companies are left somewhere else. They're like left in the flip phone era of iPhone or something.
Yeah.
So that's what we see. So it's very bullish, and it doesn't have to have materiality for a while. Like that's not the signal. That's not the reason. There's nothing wrong with what AI5 is going to do at its, TSMC making that product for Tesla. But AI6 just tells us that, yeah, they're going to go for it. They're not holding back. They're no longer an auto company. I mean, the automobile is a platform for the autonomous outcomes of the company, the robotaxi outcomes. It's not, oh, sure, they'll sell autos for a good amount of time into the future. I mean, there may be a point where they stop selling autos because it's a foolish business to stay in. But I don't know. I mean, I don't have to make that call. They know how to build autos. They can continue to build autos. They know how to scale. They know how to chew gum and walk at the same time. So it's not like they can't build autos to satisfy a market. But ultimately, what are they really leaning in on? They're leaning in on cybercab for robotaxi. So they're really looking at building, robot autos as their primary. And that could be a captured product completely. They may never sell that to the end customer. That may be just something that they deploy through their own capitalization of it, right?
I've always had this metaphor that Tesla cars in the future, and even now, slowly going into it, but in the future for sure, the cars are like the toothbrush and the FSD is a toothpaste.
Yeah.
It'll be, we'll be in such a different world where I'm pretty sure some cities and even countries will mandate self-driving because human driving is now the risky driving.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to happen. I mean, it sounds crazy from a linear point of view, it sounds crazy.
Yeah.
But if you just look at the march of progress, that's an incredibly obvious thing that driving never needed to be a human operated thing. I mean, we don't drive trains. We don't drive trains. We get in a train. We don't drive airplanes. We get in an airplane. Why would you think autos wouldn't follow that transportation trajectory? Why? I mean, it just makes complete sense that it would and will, and that doesn't exclude people from having automobiles for fun, camping, off-roading, pleasure driving, but from a pure, low friction transportation model, clearly that autonomous driving will win over human driving.
Yep. True. Tesla making that deal with Samsung for AI6 this early is the biggest signal, as you said it. Tesla is becoming an AI company. It may not show it in the financials yet, but and Elon said it too. In 2 to 3 years, you will see it.
I mean, here's another thought for those that are stuck on the idea that AI6 is quote required for autonomy, which it's for vehicle autonomy. It's not, but it's just much bigger chip. I mean, look at it. It's the brain of Optimus. Optimus is going to be a absolutely massive product for Tesla. Massive. I mean, it will, in some ways, make Robotaxi seem like a small business, I think. I mean, Elon always says everyone will want one, but I think, that's almost underselling it from its utility value in manufacturing service businesses, just labor replacement type of product. And oh God, there's so many applications for something that is embodied, right? So we're living through this phase right now of autonomy through AI, which is we're using LLMs, we're using Grok and ChatGPT, and these are very, very useful tools, right? To the point where, Grok conversationally makes Siri look like a joke, right? But they're not embodied. They're not in a robot yet. And when these things get into a robot, the utility value skyrockets. I mean, it's not to say, but I mean, you can, with an Optimus, you'll be able to converse with it like you could conversing with Grok in the cloud, because that's what you're doing, right? When you're talking to your phone, you're using Grok on your phone to talk to it. You're basically, that's all your questions and answers are going through a Memphis data center, right? AXAI's data center there. But, when you have this Optimus thing, you can talk to it and have it translate to your friend who shows up in Italian. You can have it wash your dishes. You can have it take care of your father. You can have it cut the lawn. Ironically, you can have it drive you somewhere. That's another interesting topic. But yeah, I mean, this is something. And so if you look at AI6 and you look at kind of where, let's say the timeline kind of hits in 28, 29, and you look at Optimus, it probably hits in 28, 29, you're starting to see that the brain of Optimus will be 1, 2, or 3 AI6 chips inside. Absolutely, right? Yeah, I mean, the vehicles have 2, not AI6, but they have 2 hardware 4s, or 2 AI5 will have 2, because they're running a redundancy type of stack for full self-driving, right? So, but I mean, Optimus will do kind of the same thing anyway, and then they can separate function. They can separate the. So, I mean, one of the things that's interesting about AI6 is the compute on AI6 from an inference point of view will be so large. Of course, as I said, software eats hardware. So by the time we're on the path to getting that in the product will consume it. That's how life is. But it'll be large enough that the car will be doing a lot more. Right now, we think of the car with vision as its purpose is to drive us, but it has 8 eyes. So what does that mean? What it means is that it will be able to look around and infer all sorts of different things. It can spot people on the streets of the city that are potentially dangerous to you, or people people you've met before, or geez, it could even tell you what cars, you could say, hey, you know what, your friend just drove by you. You didn't see him, but it did. So, I mean, the vision thing can expand quite enormously. And beyond that, you can then see that the inference for things like, right now we have Grok in the car. But what's happening there is it's still all the inference is being done in Memphis. It's just going over the network. And while we like the idea that, or while we make the assumption that our car is connected at all times, it's not. There are plenty of places you can drive your vehicle where you don't have any access to the cloud, the internet. So it would be nice if the entire Grok model could be loaded locally and executed locally on the vehicle. With AI6, you can do that, and you can do that concurrently with running whatever FSD at the time is, even with its expanded vision use cases. So you have a lot of headroom for a lot of more intelligent, we'll call them intelligent features in the car. Yeah.
And that's why AI6 is so significant. I love it. This is why I love having Phil on the show. He gets to tell us these core fundamental stuff that it's very important for us Tesla investors to know these things, because again, it eliminates any type of noise that can be louder than anything. When you look at these signals, it really solidifies your, I guess you could say, thesis or your investment, I guess, and you're more calm when you know this stuff. It's like, okay,
that's a good way of thinking about it. There are times when I want to throw my computer across the room when I read a comment. But what drives me a little, what drives me a little crazy is I understand this at a certain technical level that a lot of people don't. I also feel like my technical knowledge is quite limited to what's going on inside Tesla's buildings, as it should be, because I'm not there and I'm not doing it. And maybe if I was, I'm not sure I'd have enough brain power to work there. But what I'm thinking is, I can see, but by understanding the technical, we are in a business here. We are not talking about Procter and Gamble making, I don't know, Love's diapers or whatever product they make. We're not talking about the markets of how much Coca-Cola, is it going to expand its, soft drink business. These are things that we can all just easily hypothecate about without any technical backbone. And we can just say, what does the market look like? And, oh, by the way, the people that can figure out those trends and invest in companies, like, oh, I shouldn't invest in Nike, I should invest in this other sneaker company. They're pretty smart, don't get me wrong. But what I'm saying is, what we're looking at here with FSD, Robotaxi, Optimus, AI in general is extremely technical. I've explained it to people over and over again, and they, I tell people, and I tell my friends, don't read my article once, read it 15 times. At about the 15th time, some people will start to go, okay, I think I get what's going on. It's not their fault. It's not that they're not intelligent. We are in a very, very technical place in our development. I mean, we are in an AI revolution. I mean, think about this. In the 1880s and plus, we were in the railroad revolution in the United States, which is a big deal. It was a big deal. I think it was like 6% of GDP. It was much bigger than what we're spending, what's happening. I mean, I think it's like 1.5% of GDP is being spent in AI, which is big, but 6%, smaller economy then, but 6% is 6%. And yet everybody could understand what a railroad was. You know, it moved people and goods. And maybe they didn't understand the technology of an awesome steam locomotive. And there's a lot to that, by the way. I saw a show on that and it was kind of blew me away. I was like, oh shit, there's a lot to this. But they didn't really need to understand that. They could just say, oh, the thing, you know, shovel coal, steam must move something. But what it does move is people and goods, right? And they could see that. They could see that it was an efficient way and a way to connect things. And so it was obvious to people that if they wanted to invest, they would invest. If they wanted to see this as the future, they could see it as the future. When we look at AI, it's really hard. It's moving quicker, moving fast. And if you go back to the beginning part of my discussion, I keep thinking about what we talked about at the very first 15 minutes. And I think, well, I think I just explained that right. But how many people are going to get that? It's parameters in a model. Oh my gosh, you know, there's a lot there. And it takes some time to know it. And if it's not your business, if it's not the thing you did, like I did software all my life, so this is a natural act and I have a high degree of interest in it. So it's even more interesting because, you know, in other words, I'm going to learn it because I'm super interested. But you know, if I talk to my brother or his friends or my friends that aren't in this business, not the technical business, it's really hard to understand and sort through fact or fiction, truth or falsehood. And so, you know, I don't know what to say other than trust the people who seem to be telling you the truth at the most fundamental levels of the truth. You know, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to tell the truth of this at the most fundamental levels where it's no BS and it has to break down into the fundamentals of what's happening, you know, not what's supposedly happening.
And this is why I love having Phil coming on. Yeah. No, I love it. And it's very important. It's very important. And that's what I call a sheesh moment too.
For anybody that listened to the very end and still hanging in there, please write to me and tell me you did, because it'll make me feel good, because I feel like I might have lost everybody in the first 10 minutes.
No. Most of the viewers that do watch this on YouTube, they do watch it to the end. Some of them,
Yeah,
like some do watch it. It's a
wow.
podcast, so it's like they put it in the ears, and you know.
Yeah. You definitely.
Awesome.
I don't know. Can you listen to me at 3 times the speed and still get something out of it? I don't know.
Well, they'll come back and listen again. Sheesh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. That's awesome. No, this is why I love having Phil on, and I'll definitely be bringing him back on. We still have to talk about, I mean, right now, Robotaxi thing. That is something that everyone's attention is on, and so we got to cover that. But there's another thing that's even bigger than that, and that's the Optimist. Again, I brought Phil here because of the FSD 14 version 14. And then after that was the AI6, which was amazing. It was perfect timing too. So, I mean, I learned a lot, and I'm sure all the viewers learned a lot as well. And if you guys did, smash that like button. And if you guys aren't following Phil on X, I really appreciate you guys do. I recommend it. Link in the description. And I recommend to read all his articles. And sometimes when you read it one time, you sometimes don't get it, but then you may have to read it a few more times. And as time goes on, it makes sense. So I highly recommend you guys to do that. Thank you so much, Phil, for coming on.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Really
Thanks for
appreciate
everybody.
it.
Thanks for everybody that's listening, hanging in to the end. I really appreciate it too.
Yeah, no, I'm sure there's a lot of them at the end, because this is such a very important, I feel like it's a very important video and information for Tesla investors to understand this, because they can easily or use this as another tool to combat the noise. I think it's a very, very strong signal. So again, I appreciate you coming and explaining, and definitely we'll see you again on the channel.
For sure.